6 o'clock, I'll call the meeting to order, and the first item of business is adoption of the agenda. Do I have a mover? Councillor Mitchell.
Moved by Councillor Mitchell, seconded by Councillor Finch, that the agenda be adopted as amended to include a public comment item 5A.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Having adopted the agenda, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof? Not seeing any. Minutes and business arising out of the minutes. A mover? Councillor Mitchell.
Moved by Councillor Mitchell, seconded by Councillor Finch, that the minutes from the February 5th, 2025 council meeting be adopted as printed and circulated.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Several timed items tonight, so we will go to the first one, which is a minor variance application AO1-25, and I will turn it over to Eric Gilbert. Thank you for coming tonight and sitting in for our usual planner, Eric. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. This is a minor variance application to permit an additional residential unit on a property zoned A1 at 41547.
Sorry, Eric. I made a mistake. I need a mover to go into public meeting.
Moved by Councillor Mitchell, seconded by Councillor Finch, that the council meeting be adjourned at 6:02 p.m. for the purposes of holding a public meeting pursuant to the provisions of the Planning Act, and that council move into the Committee of Adjustment for the purpose of hearing minor variance applications.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Apologies, Eric.
So as noted, this application is a minor variance application to allow for an additional residential unit. The property is on the west side of 41st line. The proposal would allow the applicants to construct a new dwelling in the location depicted on the screen and recognize the existing dwelling as an ARU. The proposed location of the existing dwelling relative to the new dwelling would comply with all the official plan criteria for the ARU size, this setback from the principal dwelling. It'll reuse the existing driveway location. As such, staff are satisfied that the proposal complies with the official plan criteria for ARUs. As well, it complies with the zoning provisions for ARUs. As noted, the size will be below the 140 square meter cap, and the size will be approximately 50% of the principal of the new dwelling that will be constructed. As such, staff have no concerns with the application and recommend approval, as the application does comply with all the tests under Section 45(1) of the Planning Act, subject to the 3 noted conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the planner on the report from council? Does the applicant wish to speak to their application? Are there any members of the public, either here in person or attending virtually, who wish to speak to the application? Not seeing any resolution. Is there a mover to deal with this application? Councillor Finch.
Moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that the Township of Zorra Committee of Adjustment approve application file A01-25 submitted by Stephen, Tyler, Emily, Deborah Bowles for lands described as East Part Lot 8, Concession 5, West Zorra in the Township of Zorra municipally known as 415475 41st line as it relates to 1. Relief from Section 6.0, Table 6.1, uses permitted to 1. Permit an existing single detached dwelling to be recognized as an additional residential unit on a property zoned limited agriculture zone A1. Subject to the following conditions. 1, that the approval of the ARU applies only to the existing single detached dwelling located generally as shown on plate 3 of report number 2025-50. 2, that the new proposed primary dwelling be generally located as identified on plate 3 of report number 2025-50. 3, that the owner shall acknowledge that development charges are applicable to the new principal dwelling to the satisfaction of the Township Building Department.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So your application is approved, so you just need to follow up with Chief Building Official Mike Hughes. He'll make sure that, you know, you follow the right process from here on, but basically he'll look after you from there and you're good to go. Thank you. And you don't have to stay. And a motion to come out of the public meeting. Councillor Finch.
Moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that council move out of Committee of Adjustment and pursuant to the Planning Act, that the public meeting be adjourned at 6:06 and the regular meeting of council be called back to order.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And a motion to go back into a different public meeting.
Moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that the council meeting be adjourned at 6:06 PM for the purpose of holding a public meeting pursuant to the provisions of the Drainage Act.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And Mike, we'll turn it over to you, how you want to run this presentation.
Yeah, so I'll just give a quick introduction for Joel Miller from K. Smart and Associates. We haven't seen K. Smart around for a little while, so good to see a new face. He's going to give us a little rundown on the federal drain realignment, sorry.
Thank you, Mike. And I'll aim to keep my comments as brief as I can. Thanks, everyone. This is a report that's been prepared on the federal drain. Again, my name is Joel Miller. I'm with K. Smart Associates. And just real quickly, I'll give everyone a bit of an overview of the map. When we talk about drainage, if we don't have a map, it's not worth saying a whole lot. But in any case, just a real quick explanation of the project background, how it started, and what we're aiming to do with the federal drain. It was initiated by a Section 4 petition under the Drainage Act by Lafarge due to a land use change. The federal drain is a municipal drain off 35th line that runs through the federal white cement property and then outlets to the west. And the lands where the downstream part of the drain are to outlet have been slated for quarry expansion through the approved site plan amendment. So in any case, through discussions with Mike, Lafarge did a Section 4 petition for the land use change to have the federal drain adjusted to accommodate those changes. So instead of the watershed continuing to flow westerly into a wooded area, the basic premise of the project is to continue providing service, drainage service to the road as well as the lands that are west of 35th line or east of 35th line, and just redirect all the flow. We're not going to make water run uphill, but we are going to run it in the other direction and reslope the entire system to drain east instead of draining west. And then once we're on the east side of 35th line, we will drain south in a new pipe down into an existing drain called the Murray Drain. And from there, the water will just continue to flow the way it always has through the Mackenzie Drain, eventually as the downstream receiving feature for this watershed. So that, in a nutshell, is the project. It's about 900 meters of new pipe that will be put in the ground. It's a couple hundred meters of ditch cleanout. The plan is to bore the crossing under 35th line so there won't be any disruption to traffic there. And overall estimated cost for the job is right around $500,000, $494,000. And the assessments are part of the report, obviously. Not the topic of conversation tonight. The lion's share of the cost is being paid for by Lafarge because they're the petitioner, and the project is primarily for their benefit. And we've followed all the standard Drainage Act procedures. And with that, I'll stop talking and entertain any questions. Thanks.
Thanks. Questions from council on the report? Not seeing any. Any members of the public here wish to speak to the report, in person or virtually? No? Motion to deal with the report. Councillor Stewart.
Moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that the report of K. Smart Associates Limited, dated January 31st, 2025, for drainage works known as Federal Drain 2025 be adopted at an estimated cost of $494,000.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And a resolution to adjourn the public meeting. Councillor Stewart.
Moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that the public meeting pursuant to the Drainage Act be adjourned at 6:11 PM and the regular meeting of council be called back to order.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We have 4 minutes until the next timed item, so I'm skipping through here to see what I can find that we will get done in 4 minutes. How about item 12, information items? Councillor Stewart.
Moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that item 12A be received and filed for information purposes only.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Should have done that slower. Might as well do calendar. Items of community interest. Councillor Finch.
The OCFA is putting on a policy and pie all candidates meeting on February 20th, 7 to 9 at the Oxford Centre Hall. Community Futures Oxford International Women's Day breakfast and panel discussion at the Elmhurst on February 25th, 8 a.m. to 11:30. And on February 28th, the Egg Society Winter Social Comedy Show and concert with food and drinks.
Anyone else? Councillor Mitchell.
Next Tuesday, I believe that'd be the 25th, is the Upper Thames Region Conservation Authority AGM at 9:30 at the headquarters.
Anyone got anything else? Too efficient. Yeah. Yeah, go for it.
Community calendar, we can talk about past events as well. I attended the Family Day event that the Lions Club put on at the TDRC on Monday. There were lots of people that braved the snow. I know a lot of us were still shoveling our ways out of the driveway, but it was great to see lots of members of the community come out and go for a skate, play some games. My daughter and I volunteered and painted faces, so our apologies to the parents who were washing pillowcases likely later with butterflies and Spider-Man and all the things. I was fearful of what the requests were going to be, because I'm getting to the age where I don't know what all the cool things are, so I had to rely on my phone to Google what stuff was. But another great Lions Club event, and yeah, it was a not as well attended as last year, but I think given the weather, it was a huge success. So thanks to the Lions.
Anyone else? All right, 6:15, delegations. Dr. Stephanie Radu, Beachville Museum 2024 recap and 2025 budget presentation. I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, everybody. This is my first visit to the new facility, so I'm very happy to be here today. I did get a notification as I was preparing for this delegation that reminded me I have 15 minutes, so I apologize if I gave you too much paperwork, but it's in the interest of trying to be as thorough as possible, and any questions you have we can follow up on, but I won't review everything, I'll just go over the key points. So I'm going to start with the 2024 annual review, and just want to kind of give you a picture of what our year looked like in 2024 as we head through the first few months of our 2025 calendar. But one of the things that we really focused on last year was our exercise to review our bylaws and articles in relation to the Ontario Non-for-Profit Corporations Act. This is an exercise that took quite a bit of effort from our board and our staff, just because we don't have a ton of familiarity with that act, but it was a great exercise for us to really review how we function and what our purposes are as a non-for-profit that serves the community. As far as building and grounds projects, we've realized with facility management that often we're doing facility management based on reactive processes, not proactive planning, or a full understanding of the state of the buildings that we operate out of. And so a lot of our future work for 2025 will be looking at a recent building condition assessment that was produced for the Township of Southwest Oxford by Facility Risk Solutions, as well as looking at our own physical plant management documents to make sure that we are stepping forward in an organized fashion for those pieces. The other major project that we did in 2024 for facility management was the migration of our artifacts out of barn number 1, or our north barn. This is tied to our infrastructure grant and our infrastructure projects that will see that barn renovated by 2027 into a climate-controlled space. And so a lot of work has been done by our volunteers and staff to ensure that the artifacts are carefully migrated out of there. And we've been having a number of meetings with various contractors to prepare for that work. As far as collections work, we took in 367 items into the collection last year across 11 donations, and spent quite a bit of time dealing with loose end donations that were left over from a backlog in 2004 and 2005. We also sadly saw the closing of the Salford Heritage Museum. This was a really revealing opportunity for us, the staff of the museum, the Beachville District Museum, to go see how this collection had been formed, but also to see how it was dealt with once the museum decided to close. In 2024, at the end of the year, we also created a showcase exhibit that showed recent acquisitions into the collection. If you can imagine being a donor to the museum, you bring in a family heirloom or something that you believe to be of really important historical significance, and you wonder, is this piece going to see the light of day? Are people going to be able to encounter it and learn from it? And so having those types of exhibits at the end of the year really show that we do want our artifacts that we're collecting to be on display and to be accessible to the public. We saw extraordinary progress and growth as far as our fundraising initiatives this year. Our fundraising committee jumped into new online 50/50 raffles, which was a learning curve for them and certainly a new initiative. So we're very excited that that was executed in 2024. And Light Up the Museum, which is our end of the year kind of Christmas holiday celebration. We saw some wonderful community sponsorships, 19 snowflake sponsors, 9 wreath sponsors, and 8 tree sponsors. So that made that event a fundraiser that brought in over $5,000 for the museum. Through our doors in 2024, we saw 4,730 people. Our volunteer base is growing, which is a great sign of health and interest from the community. We offered more PA Day camps this year than we've offered in my recent memory as far as working at the museum. And we launched our very first French and English online exhibit through a partnership with Digital Museums Canada. We've seen excellent growth as far as our speaker series program, so much so that in October of 2024 we had to move our speaker series into our barn and had an inflatable screen put up so that we could accommodate a larger group size. We had a record number of visitors for our egg hunt. The Zorra Heritage Committee has been active as far as fundraising and also circulating a Crossroads community exhibition. Our summer camp filled 800 of 860 available slots. And we did some outreach this year with the Embro Highland Games and the Embro Fair. One exciting additional component for our programming was brought on by a Community Futures Oxford grant that brought in Hands in Heritage programs. This is 3 different programs that were launched this year. One is Victorian quilting, one is a butter churn picnic, and one is a baseball making experience. And these are all meant to operate with sustainable materials and products from local businesses. Okay, so I will move into our budget presentation then for 2025. So if you're looking across our actuals, our 2024 budget and our 2025 budget, one thing I'll address as far as our revenue is that many of the grants that museums are given through the province and the federal government sort of have stagnated as far as available funding. So many of these programs, the Community Museum Operating Grant, the Heritage Organizations Grant, we haven't seen any further investment in those streams, and so they've held steady for at least the 6-7 years that I've been at the museum. So that's always something we're looking at with regards to revenue growth and whatnot. We still are tied to our capital projects with the ISIP grant. That's the infrastructure grant that we've been working on since 2019, so you'll see some revenue expected there once our barn floor is redone in 2025. We saw an extraordinary amount of donations come in last year from very generous visitors, so we're seeing some growth in that line as well, and improvements in our rentals, so weddings and program room rentals and things like that. So our children's programs, we've seen some growth in this line as well, not only across our summer camp, but also across some of our PA day camps, which I mentioned. And so our total revenue that we're anticipating for 2025 then would be $248,350. If you look across the numbers for our budget for 2024, you'll see that there's a significant increase there. And as I mentioned in my notes to the budget, this is because we're seeing some really wonderful institutional growth across a number of new revenue streams. So moving down then to administration expenses, there's not many major changes here from 2023 or 2024 to 2025. Really, a lot of it just responds to increases in costs of service for things like our alarm monitoring and pest control. We've added additional professional development funds just now that we have our 2 full-time staff members, and then additional bookkeeping allocations just based on the fact that there is many more financial transactions that are going on as a result of so many new programs and events and whatnot. Looking at our curatorial expenses then, these in relation to the year before, we have seen a drop off specifically with regards to exhibitions and displays. We have invested a bit more money into our special events, which is our car shows line, and our programs and outreach, which involves our PA day camps. So the payroll and wages section is where you're going to see the largest increase for our budget from 2024 to 2025. This is a result of the fact that I was on a year-long leave, and so we had our assistant curator step into the role of curator. Once I returned, now there's both full-time staff members being fully realized as far as payroll and wages. So you'll see there from $142,800 to $169,400. We looked across. One of the pieces in the maintenance line here is that our snow removal has been quite low over the past few years, so we dropped that down, and then of course we get Snowmageddon for this whole year, so we'll see how that plays out. Groundskeeper is expected to stay the same, and maintenance and repair is just a little bit lower because we know we're not going to be doing our septic again this year as we did in 2024. So our capital planning really just encompasses that barn floor refurbishment, and that includes also, when you're looking at our financials, we pay out our portion of the capital project, but then we also direct the reimbursements from the ISIP grants that come provincially and federally back to SWACs for their portion. So then if you're reviewing our investments there, you're seeing what is invested for both the Historical Society Reserve account and the Beachville District Historical Society. There's 4 under that heading as well. At October 31st, that was at $156,187.68. So then if you're looking across the expenses split with the townships, then for 2025, Southwest Oxford Township, $78,575, and Zorra Township, $75,275.
Thank you.
Yes.
Questions from council? Councillor Mitchell.
Thanks, Stephanie. Good to have you back. The 367 items that you added, did that include the items transferred from the Salford Heritage Museum?
Yes, it did. So we brought in a significant number of items from that collection, and the work for that is also ongoing. So there will be additional items that will come in 2025. Yes, we collaborated with a number of other museum professionals as well in the area to make sure that what we took was not conflicting, like we weren't taking items from, say, Tilsonburg or Ingersoll, like it was specific to Southwest Oxford and Zorra Township as lines with our collections policy. So yes, it does include a number of pieces from the Salford Museum.
Okay. And there's a line in here, over 830 online appointments were processed by the museum's website, which generated $29,000 in revenue. So can you explain to me what an online appointment is and how do you generate, because that's a significant revenue, how do you generate revenue from whatever that is?
Yeah, so when I say appointment, it encompasses any of the products that we put on through our online platform, so we call that Stripe. That includes our camp purchases, so a day of camp is one of our online purchase types. And then if you were to purchase a barbecue ticket for our summer barbecue, that would be an appointment type. If you were to purchase a PAD camp for your child for one of the Fridays, that would be an appointment type. So any of those types of registrations for events or programs are all encompassed under that, so yeah.
So it's as opposed to buying tickets out of hand and that sort of thing?
Yeah.
The online sales?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And the 4,730 visitors, how is that compared to the last 2 or 3 years?
It's almost double.
Oh.
There have been times, I think in a few reports in the past, it's been just over 2,000. So it's significantly increased. And part of that is because our record keeping is better, it's more efficient. With more full-time staff on site, we have more opening hours, more programs and events, and so everything is growing and expanding. So yeah, it's most of my last reports have just been around 2,000.
Okay. And a question on the budget end of it. You mentioned about the reserves, and I think you got about 156,000, which is listed as investments, but I don't see any money being put into reserves. So first of all, where did that 156,000 come from initially? And is it used that you only take the interest out of that and that you leave the 156,000 as in there, that you don't use any of it? How are you using the reserves?
Sure. So a major component that we have introduced to our bylaws as a result of these ONCA changes is components about a museum's dissolution. So in a situation where the museum would have to close, we have to have reserve funds set aside to make sure the collection goes where it needs to go. So obviously we're not anticipating the museum to close, but it is responsible planning for us to make sure that there are funds set aside that someone could be paid to make sure the collection gets sent where it needs to go. That's a requirement for the standards of Ontario museums, but it's also just best practices as far as caring for the collection. So there is a component of our reserves that's set aside to make sure that that dissolution piece can be executed properly. A large portion of that 156,000 came from a larger bequest that we got from Peg Caffin. She passed away in 2019, just before the pandemic, and so that bequest was set aside at a time of financial uncertainty. There is interest on the board level to make sure that those funds can be spent shortly in ways that will commemorate Catherine's work as both an educator and a politician in Southwest Oxford Township. So you will see that $75,000 likely spent on projects that will honor her and benefit the museum as well in the coming year.
Okay, that's it for me. Thanks.
Anyone else? Councillor Finch?
With your actuals ending in September, did you actually get the CMOG grant? And if so, if you did or didn't, I see that you still have it slotted for 2025. So are you hoping to get that for 2025?
Yeah, so the Community Museum Operating Grant, we did receive it for the calendar year of 2024. We also received a request for information. Basically, the museum sector is trying to push for transparency about how much money has been given to museums in this grant stream over the last decade. And the idea is to showcase that the money has not increased at all in the last decade. And so museums are doing more. We obviously see inflations of costs for museums, and so we haven't seen any growth in that stream. And so there is an ongoing effort by museum advocacy groups to see that brought to light. We anticipate we will likely receive the same amount that we've received in the last 10 years in that grant line. Yeah.
Anyone else? Thank you. Again, every year, I'm going to say the same thing that I say, which is I remember when I was very early on council, there was literally discussion at that time, before your time, about whether the museum agreement and the museum would even continue at all. And I think almost every single year since that time, the museum has done better and better and better, offered more services, had more people attend, different types of displays, different types of events with increasing attendance every year. So congratulations to you, obviously, but to the whole board and especially all the volunteers that come out to make so many of those events happen. So thank you. Very
Thank you.
Pleasant report to receive.
Good, I'm glad. Thank you.
Thanks. And the next delegation is Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, Sarbjit Singh and Chris Tasker. I'll turn it over to you.
Hello, good evening to the mayor and the council. It's good to be back here. It has been a year. So the presentation today focuses on providing updates regarding the Embro Dam and Harrington Dam since last year. So the presentation is divided in two parts. For the majority part, we'll focus on Embro Dam, and then we'll switch to the Harrington Dam. So I will start with the ownership. Back in January last year, you guys asked us to find some information regarding the ownership. So we found that the site was identified as a recreation structure in 52 as a potential, and the local members were concerned about the poor state of the previous dam. So eventually the dam was constructed and finished construction in 59 for the cost of around $8,000 as per the news reports at that time. The structure is currently fully depreciated in its capital value. On slide 5, you will see a picture of the official opening ceremony of the dam. The Ontario Minister of Lands and Forests officiated the ceremony. The funding portion, unfortunately, we haven't been able to find anything specific to the Embro. We don't know how much of that $8,000, how much percentage of $8,000 was contributed by the province. in our financial audits, we do have statements on provincial grants, but they don't specifically talk about Embro, so I'm unable to say how much exactly province contributed. However, because the Ontario Ministry of Lands and Forest was involved during the opening ceremony, it leads me to believe that there was some sort of interest in the area. And it's worthwhile to mention that the area adjacent to the dam was at that time being managed by the Ontario Ministry of Lands and Forest. So before the 90s, most of the province was funding both the flood control structures and recreational structures such as Embro. However, in the 90s, there was a big cut in the funding. Between 1993 and 2002, the conservation authorities lost around 87% of their funding from the province. In 95, Bill 26 also limited activities supported by the province to the flood control structures. So all in all, the provincial funding was eliminated for the rural conservation areas. Also, the funding for the operation and maintenance of the Embro Dam was also eliminated, essentially. So the responsibility for the operation and maintenance of the structure was still with the CA, and we had to rely on the municipal levy to provide those services. The responsibility for maintenance of the conservation area got transferred to the Embro Pond Association, which was formed by the leadership of some local residents. There were some later changes in the Conservation Authorities Act between 2019 and 2021. In the new regulation 686 under the Act, the province introduced three categories. Category 1 talks about mandatory programs and services that the Conservation Authority has to offer. The Embro Dam falls under that category. So according to the regulation, we are again reliant on the municipality on the levy to operate and maintain the structure. And now there are some updates regarding the Embro Class Environmental Assessment. We issued the notice of completion in July last year. We published the notice in through various media, and after the 30-day comment review period, we received responses from a number of different entities. For example, Ontario Rivers Alliance strongly supported the removal of the dam, that is alternative 4, which was a preferred alternative. The Ontario Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism stated that we have fulfilled our due diligence for the cultural assessment. They recommended some edits and recommended some further archaeological assessment during the design phase. There were more comments from the Ontario Ministry of Environmental Conservation and Parks, MECP. They have asked us to provide detailed documentation on the engagement with the First Nations. They've also asked us to include additional sections in the report, which will result in some edits. We have been asked to complete some shallow well assessment to assess the impact of removal of the dam on the shallow water wells around the area. And we have to provide a detailed drawdown plan before the detailed design stage. For the next steps, we are planning to engage with the First Nations that were identified by the MECP. This engagement will be broader in approach because we have been looking to talk with them regarding some other environmental assessment for other structures in the watershed that we have. So, and we have some other discussions with between other departments within the UTRCA. So we are looking to have a broader discussion with the First Nations in the coming few weeks. As per what are the next steps for the report, we are currently working on updating the report to address the comments from MECPM and MCM. We will engage with the First Nation on a broader level, and we will issue an addendum to the report and provide another 30-day comment period as required by the Act. This is a budget update that we had originally provided to the Zorra staff. This table remains the same. The only difference is that in 2024, we were not able to proceed with the preliminary design because of the comments from MECP. So we'll have to delay that into later this year. So once we finish our editing and finalizing the report, we can proceed with next stages for the project. Next up is the Harrington Dam. So as you might have heard, last August there was a big localized rain event that resulted in overtopping of the dam. Some local residents told us that there was over 8 to 9 inches of water flowing over the embankment. So that basically resulted in extensive amount of erosion. You can see the first picture on the left. This is looking towards the conservation area, and this is close to the east abutment of the dam. So once the dam overtopped, we were concerned that it's going to, it can potentially happen again because the summer was quite rainy during that time. So we sandbagged the upstream edge of the embankment to divert the water into the spillway in case that happens again. You can see on the picture on the right how extensive the damage was. The end post of this fence is fully exposed in the picture. We had to remove around 22 to 23 trees to be able to clear the area, so to prepare this for restoration. It took us a bit of time between August to November to fulfill the requirements of all the permits, get the contractors on site. So we were able to begin the work during the mid of November, and this is currently the end result. This picture was taken towards the end of November. We have restored the embankment. There is some erosion control matting on top of the embankment. So we have also hydro-seeded the top of the embankment. So during the spring, we're hoping that the grass will germinate and we can get good cover so that trees don't grow again on the embankment. This last slide is a summary of the budget update. We had originally provided this table to Zorra staff. The only change is on item number 7, in which we updated the cost of the repairs that was incurred due to restoration work. So that was around $22,700. Everything else remains the same. The only other thing that I can point out is the dam safety review we weren't able to proceed with that this year because the provincial funding, the WECI funding, wasn't approved for this project. We actually weren't able to apply for the funding this year because of the amount of projects that were being applied for to the province. So this will have to be delayed until at least next year. And that's it. be open to any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Questions for the delegation from council? Councilor Mitchell.
Yeah, one question on the Embro Dam and one question on the Harrington Dam. The process on the Embro Dam appears to be do some studies and then consult and then do some more studies and do some more consulting. And I think in the last presentation that you made to us, there was some talk about the initial actual decommissioning would involve trying to figure out what the natural water course would be. Has there been anything done last year or anything planned for this year to actually do something other than study and consult in moving towards those first steps of the decommissioning, long before we get the high hose in or whatever is going to eventually be working there?
We will not be able to proceed with any detailed design until the study is concluded. We were hoping that we're basically hoping that we'll be able to get a green light to proceed with the detailed design last year. However, due to the comments and the time we had, we just didn't have the time to go back and work on the edits to the report. So the process has been delayed, unfortunately. We are hoping that this year, once the report is finalized, that we can proceed with the initial, we can proceed with the detailed design.
And that would be, what's the very initial first step to actually, we've been talking about this for a long time. Sounds like we're going to talk about it for a long time yet. What's the initial step to actually getting something done?
So if I could jump in as well to try and respond to the question. It's critical that we complete the EA before we proceed with any work. And it's unfortunate that the EA has been extended, drawn out, and that we find ourselves yet again doing, as you put it, more study. Mm-hmm. But it's important that we get through that before we can proceed with any design. That establishes where we're going. It establishes the parameters within which any design work would occur. So I'm not sure whether that better addressed the question.
You just got to follow the process.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah. And the Harrington Dam, the $22,711 to repair it, who pays that bill? Township of Zorra or the Upper Thames?
As Sarji pointed out in the previous, some of the previous slides, the funding that we get for that particular dam is coming from Zorra. So either it'll come out of reserve, which would have been Zorra's input into that's set aside for that, or would be included in levy in subsequent years.
Okay, so one way or
other,
another we pay.
One way or the other, unless there's any senior government funding that can be applied to it. And of course that happened. We don't have the ability to apply for senior funding after it was needed to fix it immediately, relatively immediately, for fear that it overtopped and again and completely.
Right. Is there I know this was one of the second or third huge rainfall event that we had that caused this over. Is there any steps that can be taken to prevent an overtopping in the near future?
That's one of the primary issues with the dam is it doesn't have adequate spillway capacity. One of the reasons why we're looking at alternatives, which would have included decommissioning. Those are some of the alternatives that were considered through the past EA work. It's not, and some of that work also identified that some of the measures which we would put in place in other structures aren't really possible there. An emergency spillway, because of the stability issues with the structure. They're either looking at a completely new structure or if you're looking at some decommissioning or naturalization of similar to what was proposed for Embro. So that's one of the major challenges that we have is it doesn't have the adequate spillway capacity to be able to pass floods, which we have had multiple times since 2000 when it was overtopped and had similar damage done. It's been overtopped a few times since that time without any damage, and this time was overtopped enough that it did additional damage. So the simple answer is not really. There's
Okay.
not much we can do. That's why we need to be looking at alternatives.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Thanks very much. And the next item is public comment period, 6:45, Bryan Smith. And just a reminder, we don't get these very often, so a reminder to Mr. Smith and to council, 3 timed minutes, no questions and answers from council, and on we will go to new business, to the next item of business after that. So I'll turn it over to you for your 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'll be brief, unusual though that may be for me. Anyways, so what I'd like to comment on is your minutes, item 12, section D, in the context of renewed efforts by the waste industry in Ontario to repeal the hard-fought right to say no and the 3.5 kilometer distance that gives people that right to say no from a potential dump site. So this is historical, goes back a good decade. It was a very hard-fought decade in which Zorra Township and others worked to prevent a private dump. I say this in context to your minutes because your minutes are talking about the curbside collection report, which is predicated on there being only one dump in Oxford County, or landfill I should say properly, that being a municipally managed one that would meet the strategic plan of the county and meet the goals of the township. So I picked out a few points to make about that. In the summary of that document, it talks about a big stress on source-separated organics. Typically, in private dumps, there is no separation of any kinds of materials. It is holus bolus, everything goes. The report highlights that the curbside collection report and the efforts of the county would increase waste diversion, whereas in fact, were there a private dump in Oxford County, it would mean that garbage would come into the county, which is the contrary of that. It would reduce landfill emissions, and typically when you get that mix in a private dump, which is what normally happens there from rot and from transportation, you get more emissions of various kinds. And they talk about odors, obviously that's one of them. Typically, what happens in our plan and in where we're going forward is a reducing greenhouse gases and of climate change. The transportation of waste into the county, the methane due to the organics mixed into that private dump would in fact increase climate change, and I would say just following the previous report, and therefore increase the risk for weather events that produce the kind of problems that you're faced with based on that report of dam overtopping. In terms of the fit to the strategic plan, we're looking for community vitality as a county and as a township. We're quite aware from a survey that was conducted, in fact, by the dump proponent when they were active in their quest to do it the first time, that businesses would close in the face of that dump. That doesn't help community vitality. We're looking for environmental sustainability. We know that leakage of leachate, which is the liquids that accumulate inside a landfill and absorb dissolved or actually floating particles, then can leak into the environment, contaminating soil as well. And we know that via the air, that you can get fine particulate matter, which bypasses the sinuses, pierces the lung, affects the heart, and closes the fine capillaries to the brain. So you don't want fine particulate matter in what you're inhaling. And typically, the transportation of materials into a landfill and the materials in the landfill being pushed around create those kinds of health hazards, as outlined by Dr. Ray Copes of the Dalla School at University of Toronto. And finally, the strategic plan around curbside collection says we're going to foster a progressive government. And I see a motto that says doing our part. And I'm aware that Zorra spent much time and energy and intellectual effort and did lots of research and evaluation on a project and concluded that no was the right answer for a private dump. And now we have people who are saying, well, yes. And it's not your right to say no. Just a couple of other things. The county has done some stuff around their plan, and they developed it based on public feedback. We know that public feedback is positive about municipal management of waste and is extremely negative about private management of industrial waste. And we know that we have alternatives to organics, including a couple of enterprises in the county, like the formerly called Stormfisher, but the Generate Upcycle plant. Just a few more notes, if I'm still within my 3 minutes, I hope. Barely. Okay, I'll just say that any hole in the ground could be a dump. Zorra has lots of holes in the ground. You call them pits and quarries. There are people who would love to fill them. By filling them, that means rehabilitation costs get avoided by the companies that own them, that they're filled to grade level or above, they're grassed, and with those 3 inches of tops of excess soil topping them, they claim that they are good recreational spaces. They continue to off-gas. I don't want my kids playing, my grandchildren, I guess, playing where they're off-gassing and breathing methane. How many inside 3 minutes still? Was it more like 15? I have more time.
Are you done?
I should be.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
All right, then. I think that the only things we have left then is a notice of motion and confirmatory. So notice of motion 14A, notice of motion regarding road safety, Deputy Mayor Grigg.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Finch. Whereas speeding, distracted driving, and impaired driving are among the leading causes of driving-related collisions, injuries, and fatalities in Ontario. And whereas municipalities are called upon to modify driving behavior through expensive infrastructure and even more expensive policing. And whereas infrastructure and policing are inherently limited in their effectiveness at reducing speed and distracted driving and entirely ineffective at reducing impaired driving. Therefore, be it resolved that Zorra Township calls on the provincial and federal governments to do everything in their power to limit speeding, distracted driving, and impaired driving, and thereby reduce collisions, injuries, and fatalities in our communities. That the Township of Zorra specifically requests that the Government of Ontario take action to implement the Rural Road Safety Program that Good Roads has committed to lead, which will allow Ontario's rural municipalities to make the critical investments needed to reduce the number of people being killed and seriously injured on Ontario's rural roads, and that Zorra Township staff work with Oxford County and all Oxford municipalities on the feasibility of implementing a long-term Vision Zero policy and the Good Roads Rural Road Safety Strategy across all of Oxford, and that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the Ontario Premier, Ontario Minister of Transportation, Ontario Minister of Infrastructure, Ontario Minister of Agriculture, Ontario Minister of Rural Affairs, Ontario Associate Minister of Emergency Preparedness and Response, and Ontario Minister of Health and Good Roads. And further, that this resolution be circulated to all Oxford Police Service Boards, Safe and Well Oxford, Good Roads, and all municipalities in Ontario requesting their support.
As the mover, do you wish to speak to that?
Very briefly. So I just sort of want to address some of the background that led to this motion. This motion came from a series of conversations that happened with colleagues from across the county as we were looking at some of the things that were affecting and impacting our communities and how we can address these. And I think, you know, what's happening in Zorra is not unique. It's happening all over the place. And I'll borrow from Mayor Ryan, who in these conversations will say, you know, we have, if I don't buckle my seatbelt, my car starts beeping at me, but I have a vehicle that I can drive 200 kilometers an hour where we don't have any speed limits that permit that. So when there are things that we're restricted with in terms of having some impact, that's where we need to look to other levels of government to really step in and help address this issue. And so this motion is coming forward in 3 municipalities in Oxford right now, and hopefully we will start this conversation that's advocacy based, but also looking to see how we can collaborate to find some tangible solutions for our road safety. And at that, I will leave it to my seconder to carry forward this message.
Councillor Finch is the seconder.
First, I'd like to share a little info I pulled from the Good Roads website. First is from Good Roads implementing Vision Zero in Ontario. The ultimate goal of Vision Zero is to achieve 0 fatalities or serious injuries on our roadways. In Canada, at the federal level, the Canadian Council of Motor Transportation Administrators is the custodian of the Road Safety Strategy 2025, encourages all road safety stakeholders to make Canadian roads the safest in the world. RSS 2025 is the high-level strategy whose objective is to enable all jurisdictions in Canada to realize 0 fatalities and serious injuries on our roadways nationwide. Good Roads Rural Road Safety Initiative. Rural roads are more dangerous than other roads. In 2019, there were 428 traffic fatalities on municipal roads, of which 205 occurred in rural municipalities. The unfortunate reality is that with 13.3% of the provincial population, rural Ontario accounted for 48% of traffic fatalities on municipal roads. Many rural, remote, and northern municipalities are responsible for maintaining extensive road networks on a smaller population/tax base. As a result, those roads tend to be older and in poorer condition and incorporate only basic road safety and infrastructure. This motion has been very emotional for me. On October 15th of 2022, just weeks before I took seat as Ward 4 councillor, my coworker and dear friend and her sister were on their way to my house for a visit when they were struck by a vehicle at Punky Doodle's Corners. My friend passed away. Her sister survived with very lengthy recovery time in the hospital. She was one of my biggest supporters while I was running for this seat. She had just graduated nursing, just got engaged, and had such a bright future ahead of her. On September 1st, 2024, my niece, my daughter, and her friend had just finished work and were en route to meet us at the Paris Fair. They never made it to the fair. We wound up at the hospital with only my daughter and her friend making it to the hospital. My 17-year-old niece passed away. She was to start grade 12 in just a few days, get back to her rugby practice and teammates she loved so much. She was to be graduating grade 12 this year, deciding what college she wanted to go apply for, just starting her life. My point to telling you this is we have all seen or have been affected by collisions, speeding, distracted driving, and fatalities on our roads. We sit in these seats and sometimes wonder how we can make change happen. This motion is the beginning to make these real lasting changes happen. When many of these roadways were built, they worked at that time. The speed wasn't what it is today. There wasn't as many transport trucks on the road or the amount of traffic commuting like people do today. The vehicles keep changing. Not long ago did we not even have seatbelts in our cars. Now we get a ding when we start the car, put it into drive, and if the driver or passengers don't have their seatbelt on. We get a ding and the light goes on the dashboard if something isn't right. The tire pressure is low or it needs an oil change. We have a GPS in our vehicles versus paper maps. Technology has come so far on our vehicles. It's wild to me that a GPS can tell me the speed, but why not give me a ding if I'm over that speed limit? It can tell me when on the highway, what cutoff to take and where to turn. But what about the stop sign? Why not a noise to get the driver's attention? We are doing our best with what we have at this time, with rumble strips, flashing lights, four-way stops, roundabouts, etc. But this motion is a great way to move forward, collaborating with others, and to work as a team to make our roadways safer for everyone. Needless to say, I am in full support of this motion, asking Zorra Township to work with Oxford County and all Oxford municipalities on implementing a long-term Vision Zero policy and good rural road safety strategy across all of Oxford.
Anyone else? Councillor Mitchell.
First of all, I want to thank Councillor Finch for her personal comments in supporting this motion. I too support this motion. There's basically three components to having safe roads. There's road design, law enforcement, and driver behavior, and they're all tied in together, and they're all coming under different jurisdictions. We do what we can, not only with maintaining our maintenance schedules and whatnot, but a few years ago we decided that we would paint white edge lines on all our rural paved roads to make them safer. Not a glamorous thing, but one of those things that can prevent an accident, hopefully. So I'm fully supportive of this, because it says that the province and the federal governments do everything in their power. They have power over a lot of things that we don't. So if by passing this motion we get more action, not only at the county level, but at the provincial and federal level, I think that's a good thing.
Anyone else? Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, full support as well, for all the same reasons that everyone else has already stated. I think we've seen the increase in traffic as well, and with that, the increase in collisions and fatalities in the township. And I think this is a strong call to action, and it's a good time for us to step up as well, given the fact that there's some large growth coming to our own municipality in the upcoming years, and we're going to see increased traffic because of that as well.
Yeah, this has been kind of brewing in my head for a number of years. I was always reluctant to bring forward Vision Zero specifically because it's largely aimed at very urban, traffic situations, and so, not that relevant. I always sort of thought. But frankly, parts of Oxford and now, as you say, parts of Zorra are going to become more urban than they were before. Probably more than one set of lights soon. More than one crosswalk already in the township in the last few years. But what really got to me in the last few years was the number of times I had conversations with residents, and they were frustrated at the safety of an intersection or lack of safety of an intersection, and were saying, what can we do? What can we do? And I started to get frustrated because when you think about, the three E's is the way I knew them: education, enforcement, and engineering. And I thought, well, so education is not municipalities at all. There's nothing we can really do about how people learn to drive, keep their license, et cetera. Enforcement is kind of us in that we fund policing, but that's behind a police board, and the provincial legislation that governs it is what it is. And so really not maybe as much in our control as we might like to think. And then I thought about the engineering part, and I thought, well, that's really us. Well, except that not when it comes to the cars at all, only when it comes to the road, which is actually the least effective way to control people's behavior on the road. The vehicle is the thing. And we can't, as a municipality, control the vehicle or the driver at all. So if we actually want to improve safety, the tools that we're left with as a municipality are arguably the least effective tools to actually do something. And I felt like every time a situation comes up, we do what we can do, and it's never enough, and we know that it's never going to be enough. So again, you know, I'm moving the car, snowbound for the last few days, moving the car around the driveway to blow all the snow out. And every time I move it, I don't put my seatbelt on because I have all my snow blowing gear on, and it beeps at me. But I know coming into town here, it tells me, it can see the stop sign, and it tells me there's a stop sign, and it doesn't make a sound. And it's absurd. We have the ability to tell people, make an annoying sound. Like, I mean, when I don't have the seatbelt on in the car, if it takes me more than I don't know how many seconds, it gets louder and louder. Like, and yet no sound at all for a stop sign. No sound at all. You could go 100 and a 60, and it doesn't make a sound. You know, not every car has those features, but in the next 5 or 10 years they will. So I think we need to make the commitment ourselves that we're going to explore the feasibility of Vision Zero and the Good Roads policy, and then go to the province and say, we're doing everything that we can do. We need you to do the same thing. We need you to improve driver education. We need you to improve the safety requirements of vehicles, or everything that we can do as municipalities is not going to be enough. As the deputy mayor said, we've worked with a few other different municipalities in Oxford on this. I think that we're going to get broad support in Oxford to collaborate on making this happen, and to advocate with the province and the federal government that they do their part as well. So, happy to support this. Anybody have any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And confirmatory. Deputy Mayor.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Stewart, that bylaw 05-25 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council held February 19th, 2025 be read a first, second, and third time this February 19th, 2025, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign the same and affix the corporate seal thereto.
Any discussion? All's in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And motion to adjourn?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Stewart, that this session of council be now adjourned and herewith closed at 7:12 p.m. And the next meeting of council be called for March 5th, 2025 at 9:30 a.m. in the council chambers at the Zorra Municipal Center.